Welcome to the Story Nerd Podcast, Hook Your Reader episode. This is where we give authors our professional advice about their query letters and first 10 pages writing samples.
I am Kathleen Fox, and I'm a literary agent with the Rights Factory in Toronto and a freelance editor with Fox Editorial.
And I am Valerie Francis. I'm a writer and a story editor, and I teach women who are writing in all genres how stories work so they can finish their books faster and without frustration. So on today's episode, we're reviewing a historical fantasy from Roger Alex Goudreau. Now, it takes a whole lot of guts for people to send in their work and have Kathleen and I review it publicly. But you know what? I think it shows that they're willing to step out and bet on themselves, and not many people are willing to do that. So we're happy to help. So Roger, thanks so much for sharing your work and for giving us all an opportunity to learn. Now, before we get started, as always, we would love it if you could help other writers find our show simply by leaving a rating and review. Apple Podcast listeners, you can do it right from your phone. Just go to the show's landing page, scroll to the bottom, click the stars. It's that simple. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button so you never miss an episode. All right, Kathleen, I'll get started by reading Roger's query letter.
Sounds good.
Dear Miss Francis and Miss Fox, a fan of Story Nerd and a past student of Valerie's, I noted with interest the new segment reviewing query letters and sample pages. Considering Kathleen's interest in historical fantasy and fantasy grounded in reality, I offer Devoted Beyond Death. Complete at 95,000 words, this standalone fantasy with series potential features diverse characters from Earth cultures of the past 2 centuries, plus one Spanish inquisitor, defending Earth in an afterlife that's nothing like what they expected. With a focus on family bonds in a gritty setting, my novel will appeal to fans of Christopher Buehlman's The Daughters' War or Godkiller by Hannah Canner. When Alistair Connolly said he'd die for a chance at closure with his daughter Tristan, the universe granted his wish. After months of alcohol-soaked grief, a car crash lands him in Bastion, where people who died heroically are reborn with magical abilities to defend Earth from a monstrous enemy. And he is conscripted into a century-long war. Unfortunately, Alistair has no powers. He considers himself no hero, and angers old and new stand between him and Tristan. When Alistair narrowly thwarts an infiltration that nearly destroys Tristan and their company's commander, he reveals the enemy's new weapon, which corrupts and compromises the heroes of Bastion. A counterstrike meant to end the threat instead leads to decisive defeat, leaving the company scattered, heroes corrupted, and Tristan captured. With the enemy racing to overwhelm Bastion's final defenses, Alistair must overcome his self-judgment and lack of power to rally a band of surviving defenders, free Tristan, and stop the enemy before they can reach Earth. He'll do whatever it takes to protect his family on Earth and save Tristan's soul, even if it costs him his own. I earned my MFA in creative writing in October 2024, and I published several short stories and anthologies in 2025. Thank you for your time and consideration. I hope to hear from you soon. Sincerely, Roger Alex Goudreau. Okay, Kathleen, why don't you get us started with your thoughts on Roger's query letter?
Yeah, before I get into my thoughts, just a really quick note that anything that I say here, any advice or recommendations or opinions are my own, and they're not reflective of the Rights Factory or other agents, so I can only speak for myself. So for this query, the opening gets started with a bonding line. There's the book metadata. There is a comp line. My question is mostly about these 2 comps. So I'm wondering if they're both highlighting family bonds in a gritty setting. They're both, like, it introduces them with that description, the family bonds in a gritty setting, and then it lists them together. So I haven't read them, so I don't know. But the comps should highlight different aspects, different elements, different themes of what's in your novel. So like the specific theme or element in novel A meets the specific theme or element in novel B. The books themselves, I looked them up. They seem to be good on the surface. They are recent. They've sold well. They're in the same sort of genre. But I would suggest helping the agent get more of a specific idea about why you're using those comps and what's different about them in like each of them. The plot paragraphs. So they also give us some surface information as well. But I did have a lot of questions that came up about what I feel are missing specific details that would help me visualize better, and theorize better. Um, so I wondered how Alistair died heroically. I wondered if Tristan was also in Bastion too. Um, and something that was mentioned as well, I'm just looking for it here. It says a centuries, like it's a centuries old, sorry, a century old war. I get like the general vibe that this is older than just a century. Like it seems to me like this is like forever. You know what I mean? So I don't know if the timeline's right there. Um, I also wondered who's in charge of Bastion and who sets these rules that only heroes who have died are the ones that are there. And then why would they be subjected to what we see in the opening pages? Like it just doesn't seem like a very nice place to be when you die. So I mean, who knows what it's like? In the second paragraph, I wasn't sure what angers old and new referred to. I wasn't sure what that meant. I wondered a lot about who the antagonist is, like the enemy. I need some more details there. It wasn't clear to me who or what exactly the enemy is and what their end goal is. What happens if they reach Earth? Like to me, that feels like probably the very worst case scenario, but I don't have enough information there for me to be able to theorize enough about it. Um, so yeah, I think we need more details on what that means so that agents can visualize those stakes. And I'm also wondering what it meant to save Tristan's soul. What happens when you save a person's soul in Bastion? What happens to Alistair if he doesn't save his own soul? Where does he go then? Because he's already dead. So I don't know if you can die again or, you know. So I'm wondering about that. And I'm wondering what exactly he has to do to defeat this enemy. How risky is it? How impossible are his odds? So, I mean, it's an interesting premise on the surface. There's a spin on the afterlife. For those who are in it are defending Earth and humanity. It's a cool concept, but I think some more specific plot details would be helpful.
All right. Well, I had a couple of follow-up questions about the query letter, as I always do, but you've already answered a couple of them. Like, I did wonder about the line where Roger says it's like for fans of, which in and of itself is fine, except it only talks about the reader. It doesn't also talk about the plot. So, I mean, my guess would be it's fine. What he has is fine, but he just also needs to add, um, it's like X meets Y in terms of the plot, or, it's like the character of so and so, but in this other world, or something that suggests the plot. Um, Now, when we get to the hook paragraphs, so these are the plot paragraphs, like the back cover blurb stuff. It's really interesting, Kathleen. We've picked up on a bunch of the same things, right? And I even wrote in my notes that my guess is that this is not gonna quite land for Kathleen, because it didn't quite land for me, and I can tell you why it didn't quite land for me, because I did an analysis of it, because that I can't stop myself, that's just what I do. So Roger has given us 3 paragraphs, which is great. 3 paragraphs is really, pretty standard, so I think in terms of word count, he's fine. Paragraph 1, however, and the first sentence of paragraph 2 are all backstory and setup. They're not about the plot or the story spine. Instead, what authors want to do here, right off the bat, when you're talking about the back cover blurb, is start with the inciting incident. Like, what is the thing that kicks off the whole plot? From this summary, I think the global inciting incident is when Alistair reveals the enemy's new weapon. Um, but I don't know what the weapon is. Is it the weapon which corrupts and compromises the heroes of Bastion? Like, I'm not sure. I had a lot of questions about the weapon because it feels like that's a really important part of the plot. I just want to know why, because that's going to give me an emotional reaction when it pops up in the manuscript. So, in terms of the 4 story questions, I'm probably going to drive everyone crazy talking about the 4 story questions, but they're really important. Like, this is a really great place to either start writing a new book or start your editing of your current manuscript. So, in terms of the 4-story questions here with Roger's book, we know the protagonist is Alistair and that he has no powers. We know that what he wants, or his object of desire, is to free his daughter and save Earth. And we know the stakes, his soul and his daughter's soul and Earth. However, we don't really have any specifics around any of that. Like you said, Kathleen, he can't really die again. So, like, what's what's happening? What's the buzz? Tell me what's happening. Like, in this is a war story in terms of its plot, and the stakes in a war story are life and death. But Alistair and Tristan are already dead, so I don't know what happens to them. Damnation, presumably, if it's their soul that's at stake. Um, damnation isn't really a stake that we would naturally attach to a war story, although we certainly could. Absolutely, it could be because, for example, in a typical war story, the damnation could be, say, a general or a commanding officer who has had to make a really difficult choice to sacrifice uh, a certain platoon to save a whole lot more people, and that is damnation of his soul because it's a best bad choice. Like he's going to be responsible for the deaths of many people, no matter what he chooses. So damnation is not off the table when it comes to a war story. I just don't know if that is on the table for this book or not. Um, and also, like you, Kathleen, I also picked up on we don't know who the antagonist is really, and we don't know what threat they pose. This just talks about the enemy. It just references the enemy here in the query letter. So, what I would like to see here in the plot paragraphs is specificity. Who exactly is the enemy? What exactly is their weapon? Exactly what threat does it pose to Alistair and everyone else in the story? I mean, it won't kill them, right? Because they're already dead. Um, so, what exactly happens to their soul? And what's going to happen to the people on Earth? And which people is it on Earth who are in trouble? Like presumably, like we know he has living family members who are still on Earth because that is mentioned in passing. But without specifics, it's difficult to attach emotionally to the stakes. And the bigger your story idea is, the more narrow the story focus is. So there's a really famous photograph. I'm totally forgetting the name of the photograph, but it's from the Vietnam War, like in real life, a photograph. And it's of a little girl. It's in black and white. It's of a little girl, and the bomb that went off was so powerful, like it just destroyed everything and everyone. And she's running down the street, and there's debris everywhere, and she's completely naked. She has no shoes on, no clothes of any kind, and it's just pure terror, and she's crying and screaming. She is one little girl, but that photo told the story of the whole war, right? So we kind of want to do that, or not kind of, we definitely want to do that when we're talking about a story. The bigger the theme that we're trying to tackle, the bigger the subject of the story, the more specific we have to be in terms of our storytelling and how we build the spine, and definitely in the query letter, because that's we can't attach emotionally to generalities. We will attach emotionally to specifics. Okay, so the final comment I have, and this is really common with MFA grads, and no, I am not in any way criticizing MFA programs. I'm going to mention it though because I see it all of the time. Roger has focused on the internal shift that takes place or that needs to take place within Alistair if he's going to triumph at the end of his story. Now, I'm assuming that Roger has done this because he has learned that characters need to have an arc, right? It's actually not true. Story is about characters don't have to have an arc. Story is about change. And yes, there needs to be some sort of change that happens in your story, but that change doesn't need to happen within the character. The character doesn't have to change. Very often, especially in global external genre stories like the one Roger has written, the protagonist is what we call a constant character. And what changes is not the character, but the world around the character. And the world around the character changes because of the character. If you don't know what I'm talking about here, if you think I'm just full of it, I want you to go back and listen to season 17 of the podcast because Melanie did an absolutely fascinating and fantastic study of constant characters and change characters. Constant characters are far more common than a lot of people in the literary world want to admit to. All right. So, as I said, Roger has written a global external, plot driven story, a war story. So, the hook paragraphs in the query letter, that is, like the plot paragraphs or the back cover blurb, they need to focus on that external war story plot. The story is the one the war story, that's the one that's forming the plot of the narrative, like the spine of the narrative. That's what readers are going to want to know about. And they're going to want some indication of what the the climax of the story is. Like when the reader gets to that point, what dilemma does the hero face? Does the main character face? And what's at stake there? Roger does allude to it. He's got to save, not only his soul but his daughter's soul, and he's got to save Earth. But again, I'm looking for specifics. What does that look like? What's happening there? Because I have no image, no visual in my mind. So once that's done, once you've explained the plot of the global story, the war story, then if you've got any room left in the letter, you can always then reference Alistair's internal arc or his shift. But that's a nice to have that you would add only if you have room. It isn't something that would be the focus of the plot paragraphs in the query letter. All right, Kathleen, let's get on to the first 10 pages writing sample. Why don't you go first?
Sure. Okay, so in these opening pages, we are getting some details about the main character and about the setting. We do get a sense of the vibe and the character's mood and personality. We know he's unhappy, he's angry, even, he's a drinker, he just wants to be left alone, and he's not getting it. Um, so there is an imbalance of power that we see here, and there's nothing he can do about it, which is fantastic for readers. There's also some really great line level writing here. It's very, very strong. There's great descriptions like bruised sky and like something simple, like instead of saying he wiped his mouth, he drew a dusty sleeve across his mouth. So it's just simple little things to just elevate that writing, which I really, really enjoyed. Something I might expect from an MFA grad. At the bottom of page 4, there's a line that evokes curiosity. He talks about the two figures that seem out of place, but he doesn't get a chance to find out who they are or why they seem to be watching him. So that to me, I was curious about that, and it seems to be something that will come back later. So it's something that I am just keeping in the back of my mind. Um, we're also seeing some hints of something Alistair desperately wants. There are others who have like badges on their sleeves or sashes, and I think these are depicting some sort of rank or seniority or perhaps what their magical ability is, and he does not have that. So on a bigger scale, this is showing us something that he desires, and that seems to be more on a story level rather than just wanting to stay in bed and sleep off his hangover, which is on a scene level. So that's good as well. Um, on page 6, we find out that Tristan, his daughter, was in the military and died in service. So that answers my questions about the plot paragraphs, or some of my questions in the plot paragraphs in the query. So we can infer that this is pointing to his emotional wound. He lost his daughter and he hasn't healed from that yet. And I think it sounds like it actually caused his own death in a car accident. And I think nearly caused the death of his other daughter. So he's got all kinds of emotional wounds happening. Um, and I really like the part on page 6 where Thompson is healing Alistair. It like she's an empath, drawing in and accepting his wounds so that he can heal, and then she gets those wounds, right. But interestingly, she can then heal herself. Um, so I like that. Overall, I think these opening pages are in decent shape. We start with an introduction to the protagonist. He's snappy and angry and sour. There's an imbalance of power. He's not getting what he wants. Um, he's been called by the higher ups, it seems, and they have a task for him, and he doesn't understand. So there's this big crack in the wall, and they want him to fix it. He doesn't understand why it's such a big deal, but upon inspection, he's thinking there's probably a bigger problem to deal with. But it seems like his concerns are and will be ignored. So I wonder how that's going to play a role in the plot. We know where he is. We know this is an afterlife. Um, and we know that there's an enemy who is attacking people, which you have touched on. What we don't know yet is who the enemy is. We do get a name in the pages, but I still don't know anything about them. I don't know why they're attacking, how much danger Alistair or other people might be in. Um, and like overall too, we do get hints about what's holding him back from moving on, but we don't dive deeply into backstory, which I think is great. You just plant that curiosity and general knowledge, and you move on to whatever's happening in the present moment. So, and again, that line level writing is excellent.
All right. Um, I'm going to jump in. The first thing I want to say is that page 9 is almost entirely blank. No, it's the end of chapter 1, and so Roger has chapter 2 starting on a fresh page. And yeah, in a full manuscript, that's exactly what you would do. However, and Kathleen, correct me if I'm wrong on this, when you're talking about the first 10 pages writing sample that's going to an agent or someone who's going to be evaluating them to find out if they want more, to see if they want to sign you so you can start to get a publishing deal and get your career moving, I would start chapter 2 right after chapter 1 and not waste a whole page.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't leave blank spaces. Use what you've got.
Yeah, I mean, it might feel like I'm picking nits there, but yeah, if you've got it, use it. Holy Hannah.
Yes.
Okay, the enemy. I'm back to the enemy, just like you, Kathleen. They, like you said, they come in on page 10, and they're just mentioned right at the end of page 10. It's the Vinar. So, like you said, we know their name, we know they're the enemy, but we still don't know anything about them. So I'm going back to the query letter. If we had specificity in the query letter in terms of who this enemy is, and even better yet, if it's not just a group of Vinar, but someone within the Vinar who is the king of evil or whatever, then that's even better, right? And if we know that from the query letter, then as soon as it's mentioned in the opening pages, our curiosity goes up even higher. We're like, oh, ooh, here comes the bad guy. And he's a real wrongin'. So this is getting juicy now. So the query letter, and if you think of it as a back cover blurb, once your book finally hits the market, it's there to tease the reader and get them hooked on the idea of your story. So whatever you can put in there that excites them, that makes them go, oh, this sounds like a good story, which will be very well covered if you've got the 4-story questions nailed. Like, who is the antagonist? Well, the antagonist is the force, or force is getting in the way of the main character getting what they want. So how is the Vinar keeping Alistair from saving his daughter's soul? Well, I want to know. I really want to know, so that when they crop up at the end of page 10, which is a great place for them to crop up, because the agent reading is going to go, all right, I have to know what happens. This bad guy from the Vinar has just shown up. Oh, and we know from the plot paragraphs in the query letter that there's going to be a showdown with this guy in the core event. I want to know more. So again, sounds like I'm picking nits, but Roger can handle it. I know he is a client of mine. I know what his writing ability is, and so yeah, I'm challenging him to level up with it. Okay, I want to talk now about story logic and genre and world building. So I am, like you said, Kathleen, I think the premise of this novel is really interesting. Like there's a story set in the afterlife. That's different. So immediately my curiosity is piqued. I want to know how does this all work? What's happening? But I'm still a bit confused, and I'm perfectly willing to accept this is just me and that nobody else has a problem with this. And I have said this to Roger before, so he's probably rolling his eyes as he listens to this or laughing as he listens to this because he knows what I'm about to say. Okay, here's the thing that I still can't wrap my head around. This is the afterlife, but and the afterlife, and it's mentioned as the afterlife and purgatory. To me, these are spiritual places where there is no physical entity. Like when we die, our body stays here, like the meat sack that is our body stays here on earth, and our spirit or our soul ascends to heaven, the afterlife, purgatory, whatever you want to call it. In Roger's version of the afterlife, it is very physical. Alistair is a physical being with all of the physical pain he would have had on earth. Like he still breathes in the way a human does. He still has a hangover. He's stomach sick, all that kind of stuff. Likewise, there's a landscape around him that is a physical landscape. It's got mountains, it's got a sunset. They are building a wall. So my brain is having trouble with the story logic. And I'm not saying that this is a huge problem overall. I think the solution here is to set it up a bit better right on page 1. You allude to it in the opening paragraph. Where you say this is not the afterlife the way Alistair thought it was. Like he never thought he'd have to nurse a hangover in the afterlife. I think you kind of want to lean on that a little bit more just to explain to the reader what's happening. Cuz I every time something comes up about a physicality, it's taking me out of the story. And I'm thinking, how hang on, how is that possible? What is this world about? Now, I mean, intellectually, I can just go with it. I can say, well, that's the world of the story. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because every time I come across a description, and there's lots of them in these opening pages, it's making me pause, and I don't wanna pause anywhere. I don't want the story logic to trip me up in any way. Like, what do you think, Kathleen? Did you have this problem too? Is it just me?
I don't know that I had a problem with it, but I do think that, like, you can do anything you want in a story, right? The story is yours, the world is yours, you're building this. But if it's going to be that way, I think this is maybe what you were trying to say is that it, maybe give us that reason or like set it up that way. Just even one simple line, two simple lines, just so that we have that expectation. Like you do open it with, "This is not what I was told the afterlife would be." Okay, then maybe a line or two about what it is. Like, yes, you mentioned a hangover, but maybe just a little bit more focus on that would help us to believe that a little more, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. How does it work?
Yeah. Yeah. But
Like, you
but without explaining. Like,
right, without a
it
big info dump.
right.
And again, I'm saying this because I know Roger can handle this kind of feedback. Like, and, I'm just trying to think of where I can't think of the specific example. But, if this is the rules of the world, if this is purgatory, like, well, I know where I heard this from. I think it was John Edward, the psychic. I think this was where I heard it from. Uh, and oh, maybe it is. Anyway, I'm gonna go with it. Let's pretend it was him for a second. Someone was asking him, what happens to bad people when they die, like murderers and people who treated you really poorly in life. What happens to them when they die? And the 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 expert said they have to feel the way they made you feel when they were alive. So if it was a murderer, they have to feel the pain of their victims. Well, that's really cool. So, like, if there was some reason like that, then I could go with that. Because now there's an anchor. There's a and it doesn't, like you said, Kathleen, it can just be a line or two that just makes me go, "Oh, that's why he has all these physical sensations, and there's all these physical things." Maybe they aren't really there, but he is forced to feel it as, a way of doing penance or some other lesson he needs to learn in this purgatory state before he can fully ascend. Maybe the ascension has levels to it. Something like that. I don't know what it is, but I think there just needs to be an extra little bit of information just to make my logical brain go, chill out, go with it. All will be explained.
Right. Yeah, I agree 100%.
Okay. Yay. So the other question I have is around genre. Um, and again, this has to do with story logic for me anyway. So and Kathleen, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Roger described this as historical fantasy, which makes me think of something like a Bernard Cornwell. If this is the afterlife, how is it historical? So, am I overthinking this? What are your thoughts as an agent?
My thoughts are I didn't get the vibe that this is a historical setting, but I will say that the word tunic came up 8 times in the opening pages, and every time I every time I read it, I thought, "Oh, yeah, that's historical." And maybe that's just me. So maybe there's a little bit of it being woven in, but I think if this is a true historical setting, it needs to come across in a stronger way.
All right.
Tunic. I don't know.
That's going to be the subtitle of this episode, Tunic. All right. So, Roger, now I want to talk about the scene as a whole and your opening sentence. And again, this is going to sound like I'm picking nits, but I know Roger's writing ability. We've worked together for a while, so I'm challenging Roger to level up here because I know he can. All right, Roger. Yes, this is a working scene, and I know you know what I mean by that. However, there's not really anything happening. And that sounds really weird considering, this book opens with an action scene. You think there's tons happening. And yes, you've done a really good job of weaving in exposition, 100%. And when it comes to the opening sentence, I really love your opening sentence. I think it's great. His opening sentence is, the nuns who taught Sunday school never told Alistair Conley he'd have to deal with hangovers in the afterlife. The reason I think this is an excellent opening sentence is because Roger's juxtaposing two contradictory ideas, like the afterlife, which is spiritual, non physical, and hangovers, which are physical. So it immediately makes me sit up and go, oh, what's happening here? And I want to read on to find out how those two things could coexist. So, gold star for your opening sentence. Now, back to the scene. Roger, I want you to think back to the conversations we had about literal action and essential action. The literal action is the stuff that is literally happening in the scene. It's the physical action of the scene, what the characters are physically doing. In the opening scene here in your pages, there's a lot of time spent getting Alistair out of the cot. It's the first 4 pages. Alistair's waking up with a hangover, and DeMarc is getting him out of bed and on his feet. Then on pages 5 and 6, that's the whole bit about Alistair's wounds being healed. On pages 6 and 7, there's a discussion about the wall and whether Alistair can fix it. Page 9 is black. Page 10 starts chapter 2. Okay. So in the opening scene, all that's happening is that Alistair's getting yanked out of bed so he can report for duty. It's an action scene. I don't know if that is the starting point of your story, to be honest. I bet if I read your whole manuscript, and I have not done that, but if I read your whole manuscript, I bet I'd find the real beginning of your story somewhere in those first 10 chapters. Bet you darn. I just don't think that's a strong enough literal action to make a reader want to read on. Now, the opening scene does not have to introduce the global inciting incident. Absolutely. You should have the global inciting incident somewhere in the first 3 chapters. There's an argument that it can go as long as 5 chapters, but I've read some books lately where the story doesn't actually kick off till chapter 5. And even for me, and I read a lot and I'm sort of more patient because of what I do, even for me, chapter 5 is really long. And uh, the example that's popping up in my mind is one of Anthony Horowitz's murder mysteries. I think it is one of the, um, oh, it's the one where the murder takes place in a theater group. I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, as I'm reading it, I can see the structure of the story unfolding. And it's Anthony Horowitz. I have complete confidence in him. I know it's going to get started. And the global inciting incident, which is the person getting killed, right? The discovery of the dead body, that's the global inciting incident of a murder mystery, happens right in chapter 5. It felt really, really long. I would suggest that first-time writers do it at least by chapter 3. Chapter 1 is even better. But if you don't put it in chapter 1, in these first 10 pages, there needs to be a compelling scenario. So there needs to be a crisis in this scene facing the main character that feels like a crisis, that creates tension in the reader. And right now, the only crisis he's facing is, do I get out of bed or not? And I don't think that's causing enough tension, or that's creating enough tension in the reader, or really has enough stakes tied to it for your opening pages. So, Roger, my challenge to you is this, because I know you can do it. Find the real starting point of your story. Can you start your manuscript with the global inciting incident? If you can, I would. So that's my final advice to you. See if you can find the global inciting. No, I know you know where the global inciting incident is. See if you can start your story with the global inciting incident. Kathleen, what's your final bit of advice for Roger?
Um, okay, so I would say add some specificity and more comp details to the query letter. And in the pages, yeah, I agree with everything you were saying there. I would like to see more details about the enemy, and have more of a hint or a general idea about more specifics about the stakes. Um, again, I'm assuming since he's already dead, he can't be any more dead. Who knows though? I don't know. I didn't build this world, and there might be different things, that you've built that are completely different. So, yeah, more details about those things. But yeah, I agree about maybe starting the story in a different place, closer to whatever the inciting incident is, right? Um, Maybe some of this stuff is building, is giving us a sense of what his life is, or his unlife is in this world. But it's I don't know that it's anything that we absolutely have to know at this point, and maybe it's just little things that he can bring in again later.
All right. Well, Roger, that wraps it up for this week. For everyone else, if you want us to look at your work, visit storynerd.ca for all the details about how to submit. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review and tell your writer friends about us. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want copies of all the query letters and all the writing samples that we feature here on the show, be sure to join my inner circle at valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle. And to find out about Kathleen's agent wish list or what services she offers as an editor, visit KathleenFoxAgent.com and foxeditorial.com, and that's Fox with 2 X's. And remember, story theory doesn't have to be difficult. It's a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time and have fun.